Happy February, everybody, and welcome back. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, good to see you again. Wanted to hop on here and first and foremost point out something because of my attire for the day. I mean, yards, Philly brewing, birds, we know that. Super Bowl is coming up this week, and you know, as an Eagles fan, I have to rep it. And you know, clearly, Eagles, Chiefs, whatever fan you may be, let's just support the birds this week. So appreciate y'all coming back. Wanted to hop on here to break down what I think is a little bit more of an intro for beginners, especially joining the Fujifilm ecosystem today. And that is kind of going through lenses. And I have found myself with probably far too many lenses at this point because of the fact that I really decided last year to dive fully into the Fuji ecosystem. And I find with that, I've been trying out so many different Fujifilm lenses. And I also want to be very clear on that, I'm not just trying out Fuji lenses, but other third-party lenses as well. And so clearly one of the things that I always want to kind of break down is there are so many different types of lenses, you know, whether it be a more wide angle lens like this 23mm or more portrait focus lenses like this 56mm. It's really based on the use case, so don't let me sway you to say one is better than the other. It's solely based on if you want more wide angle for landscape, or just further away portraits, anything you want to do, or if you want more close-ups, so like more macro type shots, you know, a larger number lens, or lack of a better term, has a tighter field of view. So, you know, a 56 is perfect if you're looking to do some portraits. Even up to 85, where you're going to get so much more compression and the photo is just going to be sharper, and you're going to get just a different field of view out of these lenses, depending on where you're standing or how close you are or far away from your subject. So all things considered, I'm going to start this off by going through some prime lenses, going through zoom lenses, and then some other lenses that I just personally like, and I don't really, they are somewhat primes, but at the same time, they're really based on what you want to use them for because they're not your standard lens. So let's break it down and let's start with some primes. So first things first, let's start with one of my favorite lenses, which is easily one of the most compact Fujifilm, yes, Fujifilm branded lenses that I think, honestly, everybody should have. It's not overly expensive, but I really do think that this is one for the books. The 23mm f2. And now they do make this lens also in a 1.4, but it's a little bit bigger. I think this one's great. It's weather sealed, so you can use it on whether it be entry-level Fujis, whether you want to use it on, you know, like my XH2 that I'm filming out here. It's really, you know, fitting on anything. It fits on just about anything minus the GFX series or the fixed series like the X100 because you can't change the lenses on those. I think everybody should have a 23. This is great for taking more wide shots. It's not as wide as, for example, the Viltrox 13mm that I'm shooting this on. This is what I use for all my talking head videos. If you do talking head videos, just get yourself a 13mm from Viltrox. 1.4, that thing is crystal clear. But I like this lens a lot. I put it on my XE3 and my XT50 more than anything because I personally think it's a little bit imbalanced on the XH2, which is definitely a bigger body, but highly recommend this lens. If you haven't tried one, rent one, buy one if you can find them secondhand. They're usually between like the $250 to $350 mark when they're used, but great lens overall. When it comes down to my favorite lenses, I personally just find this field of view, it's the 27mm. This comes out to roughly a 40mm because one thing to note when you do have Fujifilm lenses is aside from the GFX series, all of them are crop sensor. So you're gonna get about a 1.5 times crop, which is very important to note. And so let's talk about one of Fuji's most popular lenses, which is this guy right here. This is the 27mm 2.8. And now this was not my first 27mm. This is my second, and I actually now have 3 because this one is near impossible to find in stock anywhere. They actually made 2 models of this. If I can get a nice clarity here. If not, I'll add some, B-roll kind of covering it. But this has the clickable aperture ring, which I'm not getting a focus here. That's okay. This has the clickable aperture ring. It is also weather sealed. So once again, you can use this on all the Fuji cameras, and it does have some weather resistance. I know the lower end models like the XS20, XS10, XT50, XT30, Mark II, and Mark I, or anything prior to that, they do not have the weather sealing, but this helps a little bit. It does have a little rubber ring on the inside of it when you pop it open, or at least go to mount it. But this one is weather sealed, but this is not my first one. So I do want to point out this next lens, also a 27mm 2.8. If you're just getting into Fuji and you want a budget-friendly lens, especially a pancake lens, I cannot say enough good things about the TTartisan 27mm f2.8. This is quiet. It also has a clickable aperture ring. It's great. I use it on my XE3, especially. I'm not really carrying two 27mm all the time unless I have the next lens, which I will go into shortly with my XH2 just because it's better balanced. But the TTartisan 27mm, great budget lens. I think they're around 150 new. You can probably get them for about $100 used, if not a little bit less. But with the clickable aperture ring, if I can actually spin it, it's pretty tactile, fun lens. And like I said, this is my first 27mm because I couldn't find the Fuji anywhere, but the absolute beast is what I got right here. And you may think, Chris, isn't it kind of dumb to have three 27mm lenses? Yeah, it would be if I hadn't come across this lens. And this is the Viltrox 27mm 1.2 Pro lens. And this thing is just an absolute beast. This is, once again, weather sealed. This is a Pro lens, and I'm obsessed with this lens. A friend told me about it, and while I use my pancakes, especially on my smaller Fujis like my X-T50 or my XE3, this is something that I pretty much reserve for my XH2. The 1.2 aperture is absolutely incredible. I'm not sure how well I'm gonna be able to get this on here, but let's see if I can. You can't really see too much, but the 1.2 is just pristine. This is a Pro lens, but it's not at a Pro cost, because I think the closest to this would probably be the Fujifilm or Fujinon 33mm. This is better, in my opinion. For $500, you can't really beat this lens. This is a great, not necessarily everyday lens, but anywhere lens. This is a portrait lens. This is a landscape lens. You can't beat this lens. They also do make another Pro series from Viltrox, which is the 75mm. That's apparently the best portrait lens you can get for any Fujifilm camera. I haven't personally gotten it. I want to, but I don't do enough portraits as of right now. So if you're in the market for a Pro series lens, especially at that 27mm, so roughly 40.2 or 40.5 when it comes to full frame, this lens, just get it. Can't beat it. When it comes to some other, more standard, I'm just looking around for what lenses I have sitting here right now. My first actual Fuji lens, which I've done a little bit more of a review on, is the 35mm 1.4. I love this lens. It's definitely on the smaller side, more compact. This one, if I'm not mistaken, I'm just taking a look here, I don't think this one is weather sealed. It is not. So this is the original. I want to say these came out in 2014. 1.4 aperture, 35mm focal length. I think, in all honesty, everybody should have one of these. Like, these lenses are great. The autofocus is a little bit slower. They're not necessarily the most video-friendly lens, in my opinion. If you want something more up to snuff, like go with the linear motor, Fujifilm lenses, but you're gonna be paying an arm and a leg. And this is still definitely an expensive lens. I think they're around $600 new, but one of my favorite primes because of the fact I can use it on my XH2, I can use it on the XE3 or the XT50, and it's not throwing off the balance too much. It's all metal, which is nice. It's a very high quality build with a metal lens cap. Huge fan of this. And then my last prime lens that I'll go over outside of the Viltrox, which I'm not gonna show because I'm using it to film, is when I was first starting out, as I mentioned, I had the 27mm TTartisan. I decided to pick up some of their other lenses, which I gave my 35 once I got the Fuji 35 to a friend, but I still use this from time to time for portraits. It doesn't have an aperture ring, but I still like the build quality being all metal. It also has a metal lens hood. On the TTartisan 56 1.8, these lenses are just too good for the money. I mean, I wanna say this was probably $130, $150 new. I don't remember off the top of my head, but for those tighter portrait shots, TTartisan makes fantastic quality lenses and they're not gonna break the bank. I would, like I said, like to get that Viltrox 75mm for portraits, but for the 56, it is a definitely tighter field of view. I'm a huge fan of this lens and I don't use it enough, but I'll start to use it more. As I'm doing more video challenges, especially this is actually pretty good with video, I'm not gonna lie. The autofocus is very quiet. It's got a very smooth manual focus ring. So that is my opinion in terms of like some of the best prime lenses that you can get, especially if you're starting out for more budget-friendly options. Granted, the Fujifilm lenses themselves are not going to be the most budget-friendly, but companies like TTartisan, Viltrox makes a bunch of prime lenses as well. I think there's a 23, I know there's Cirre, if that's how you pronounce it correctly, and then 7 Artisans makes some as well. I have primarily all autofocus lenses because of the fact that I like to run and gun, for lack of a better term, and be able to just focus things on the go. And even though some people will probably watch this video and say, well, Fujifilm's focus is not the most reliable, it works for me. It does. I'm not shooting pro sports. I don't need anything lightning fast like a Sony. Will I get one down the line if I'm doing more shoots oriented to that? Probably, but I don't need that right now. This works for me, and I think there are a bunch of great lenses that you can get, especially from third-party manufacturers. So next, let's go into the zoom lenses, which I only have one. And I do want to honorable mention, which I was debating getting it, but I decided to be more budget friendly, would be the new 16 to 55 2.8, which is Fuji's newest lens. I know they just did a new iteration of it. It's smaller, a little bit more compact. I want to say it's 2/3 of the weight of the original one and a little bit shorter. It's a beautiful lens, full metal build quality, fully weather resistant. The photos that come out of that are pristine and I love them. But when I was starting out, especially not just being on Fuji, I was always a big fan of Sigma lenses. I use them for my Canon, I use them for my Sony, and so I wanted to try them out for Fuji. And I came across this lens, which is the Sigma 18-250. So it's a little bit limited in terms of the field of view, but not that much. This lens is just, as compared to the Fuji lenses, so tiny. I mean, if I can get a proper focus in here, like even with it being fully extended, this lens is not big. I mean, I can compare this to my Viltrox and like with the lens hood on there, it's slightly taller, but like you can tell by the size, it's actually, let me do this just to kind of illustrate how much different it is. Like it is so tiny and it's a fixed 2.8. The only downside of this is you do have to change the aperture in camera. You can't do that on the lens. You can just do the zoom and it has the focus ring there, but you have to change everything internally. But once again, Sigma does not claim that this is weather sealed. It is more weather resistant. If I can get my focus here, let's go. There is like a nice little rubber bracket around here, which is always really good for if you have a weather sealed camera like my X-H2, this is great. I don't use zoom lenses much because of the fact that I do like having a wider aperture option, and 2.8 is great for a lot of things, but I find myself using 27mm 1.2 more than anything, along with this 13 1.4. So that's my only zoom lens. So I'm not a great bias on that front, but let's break it down into my last few lenses, which I think are worth trying out. All right, so my honorable mention lenses for Fujifilm, and these are different ones. And these are just ones that I've had experience playing around with. I own all of them, clearly, but wanted to clearly just mention them because I think they're a lot of fun, especially if you're trying to be a little bit more creative with how you're taking photos, experimenting with new different types of lenses. And I want to start this out with my favorite, which is none other than the Polar Pro Light Leak lens. This is a fully fixed lens. It's not even manual. I mean, it's all just, I want to say it's about 1 meter to infinity focus. I got the 28mm, and they come in a few other sizes. I want to say 16 and then 56 might be the other one. I forget, can't think off the top of my head, but this is a really cool lens because if I can get proper focus there, this has this little ring on it, and I'm not sure how focused this is, but it actually allows light to come in behind the lens, which gives your photos this really cool flare behind them. It's very nostalgic, and that's actually what one of the other lenses that I'm going to talk about, or more so both the lenses, because it allows you to just play around and get creative with how you're shooting, because the fact that it keeps everything from like 1 meter on in your shot in focus, but it does give some warping to the outsides, and depending on where the light is coming in, it'll give flares across the photo. It's really just a lens that you can play around with, and that's why I picked this up. I did not get any of this sponsored. I would love to be sponsored by Polar Pro because your filters are amazing. If anyone at Polar Pro sees this, I love all your products. I have a few, but this one's just notable on the Fujifilm lenses side of things. I find this very compact. I bought this for my X-T50. It clearly, once again, as I've said a million times over in this video, it goes on all of the Fujifilm that I own, but I like it with my X-T50 because the film simulations that Fuji makes, plus the nostalgia look of this lens, it's like using a disposable camera. And shout out to Polar Pro for just making an absolutely epic product. I take this anytime I go on vacation, especially if I'm going somewhere beach oriented where there is a lot of light. It's not the best low light lens really at all, but I think everybody should try these out. But if you don't want to spend money on a Polar Pro Light Leak to get similar effects, this is my next lens. If I can find it, I don't know exactly where I put it around here. Oh, it's because I have it on a camera. This is the Pocket Dispo. Yep, Pocket Dispo. I put it on my X-T50. This is a fully 3D printed lens housing with a disposable camera lens on it. And I was very fortunate to actually get some promotion from Pocket Dispo. Not on my first one. This was the one that I bought right out of the gate. I had one for my Sony as well, which I used that for a period of time. And if I ever get a Sony, I'm still keeping it because I might end up with a Sony down the line. But the photos that come out of this are just really cool. It clearly takes up no room. If I can get a nice focus there, it's the size of a lens cap, so it's not like it's hard to take around. I can literally just like put this in a bag. I have no worries about it. There is no lens cap that goes on top of it. It's $50 new. This is worth investing in if you have a mirrorless camera. They're just a lot of fun. So in the true nostalgic fashion, I wanted to go on to my last lens. And I've been getting more creative with lenses because of the fact that, especially with my X-T50, which gives that very classic Fujifilm nostalgic vibe, I wanted to go more manual, which is something that I've never really done as a photographer. I will admit that. I did a lot of autofocus. Clearly, aperture priority, things like that, where it wasn't just fully on autofocus. I choose a lot of my settings, but neither here nor there. I got this lens and I thought it was just, you know, a freebie when I was getting a camera, and I hadn't really used it for the first few months I had it, but it came with an adapter, which this is an old Minolta lens, and it's fully manual. It's a 50mm f2, but you know, you can see that this thing is wide open, and I love being able to, you know, clearly play with the aperture, and just manual lenses give you a different tactile feel. But it came with this adapter, if I can actually hold this up correctly. So this is the original lens versus the adapter, which is made for X mount. Like I said, I put this and I've displayed this on my Instagram and TikTok. If you haven't just taken a moment to play around with manual lenses, I mean, you can get this lens for probably $20 to $30, and I think the adapter, depending on where you get it from, probably the same, 20 to 30 bucks, maybe up to 50 for an adapter. They make them for all different types of lenses. Clearly you can get, you know, Canon ones, you can get Sony ones. Actually, I don't think you can get Sony because of how the thread for Fuji and Sony is very similar. But the Minolta lens, so this is a Minolta MD. I want to get an MC one just because there's a lot more MC lenses from what I've found, but this allows me to be more creative. And even though it's only an f2, the bokeh on this thing is just incredible. It's a lot of fun. And if I just want to play around, get creative with my shots, this is something with a wide enough open aperture where, you know, during the day or even like evening where there's still a little bit of light, I can get absolutely great shots with this and practice my manual focus. So overall, that is my breakdown for, you know, just intro to different types of lenses for the Fujifilm system. So if you have any questions about my experience with these lenses, drop a comment below. Like I said, you know, if you're new here, welcome, and also goodbye, because this is the end of the video. But you know, if you found this useful, if you have any questions, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Don't crush it or anything like that. I'm not gonna ask you to punch it or punch your screen, but appreciate you guys stopping by, guys and gals, and everyone watching. Look forward to seeing you next week. See ya.